I'm a park ranger in the haunted caves of the unknown. My terrifying encounters will shock you. I never should have opened that door. The dread gnawed at my stomach as I stood in front of it, a heavy wooden barrier to something I couldn't quite comprehend. Here I was, a ranger in the wilds of the unknown, responsible for watching over these sacred grounds. I had become accustomed to the whispers of the wind, the rustle of leaves, even the echoes of laughter from tourists. But this was different. My day started like any other. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting playful shadows on the forest floor. I made my rounds, checking trails and helping families find their way. But as I wandered into the cave area, the air shifted. It was colder, almost biting. The darkness seemed to stretch farther, inviting me to explore. But why was it so quiet? No birds sang, no critters scurried. The only sound that filled the void was the distant drip of water tapping against stone. It sent chills creeping down my spine. As I stepped deeper, something felt wrong. The walls pulsed with a strange energy. They weren't just rock. They had a presence, a mind of their own. Suddenly, a faint whisper sliced through the silence. It seemed to call my name, echoing off the stony walls. My heart raced. I strained to hear, but it was gone, just a chilling breeze brushing past me. I could almost smell the damp earth, heavy and ripe with age, but it was tinged with something else, fear. I felt it settling in my chest, a knot of primal instinct. Then came the noises. A soft thud, like footsteps. I froze. I scanned the shadows, my breath hitching. Was it just my imagination? I turned, heart pounding, but nothing was there. Only the oppressive silence returned. Then, a stone tumbled behind me. I spun around, eyes wide. My gut churned, urging me to leave, to bolt for the daylight. Still, I was drawn. I had to know. I crept further inside. It felt like the walls were tightening around me, pressing against my skin, suffocating. I fought the urge to scream as my fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. It was a doorway, carved into the rock like a grave waiting to be opened. What was hidden behind it? My instincts screamed to scrap the exploration. I stepped back, but it was too late. The ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, swirling like ghosts dancing in the dark. Panic swelled within me as I dashed for the exit, but the air grew thick, almost tangible, as if something unseen was holding me back. Before I could reach safety, a figure loomed in the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. Who or what was that? The darkness shifted, and I saw nothing more than a silhouette, featureless yet alive. I couldn't move, my body a statue as fear coursed through me. And just as suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the cave, sending ice through my veins, freezing me in place. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash. I was trapped. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest like a trapped bird. The shadowy figure remained still, its presence more substantial than the darkness that enveloped it. The scream echoed again, a stark reminder of the danger I now faced. I inhaled sharply, the cold air biting at my lungs as I desperately searched for an escape. The ground beneath my feet trembled lightly, a whisper of something monstrous lurking just beyond the veil of night. I cursed my own curiosity, the reckless urge that had led me to this cursed place. The walls loomed closer, seeming to pulse in rhythm with my rapid heartbeat, as if they could sense my fear, feeding off it, growing stronger with each passing moment. That I tried to calm myself, telling myself that it was just a trick of the cave, my mind playing cruel games. But the reality crashed upon me as the light struggled to penetrate the thickening shadows. I tore my eyes from the figure, looking for the door, the only way out, but it was gone. Uproarious panic surged through me as I pounded on the cold stone, my fists sliding against a surface that felt unnaturally solid. Hello? My voice trembled, small and desert dry in the vastness. Is anyone there? The silence that followed was suffocating, deeper than the shadows themselves. I felt it creeping along my spine like icy fingers. Suddenly, a whisper slithered through the air, sending chills burrowing deeper into my bones. Stay with me recoiled, every nerve ending aflame with instinctual dread. The air grew thick, wrapping around my throat, clawing at my sanity. I glanced again at the figure, sensing it watched. The shadows writhed, curling like smoke, and I caught flickers of movement out of the corner of my eye, snakes of darkness swirling and coiling. As I turned again, drawn by a strange compulsion, I faced the depths of the cave where only water should have dripped, but now it felt alive, the stone breathing softly in time with the whispers. I took a cautious step forward, a cruelly enticing lure tugging at me, and the murmur grew louder, jagged and painful. Join us, don't be afraid. I shook my head violently, the insidious voice wrapping around my mind, binding it like a web. I took a step back, but something caught my ankle, an unseen force that gripped me, pulling me down. I fell hard, the raw shock of stone against my palms jolting me into clarity. Get away. My voice boomed through the cave, desperate and raw, but it felt like just another breath swallowed by the insatiable darkness that I struggled to rise, the weight of something unseen pressing down on my shoulders, and as I fought against it, the figure drew closer. It was no mere shade. It had the semblance of a person, but its features were obscured by shadows that seemed to shift like liquid. My instincts flared, a primal terror blaring in my head. I was losing myself in this trap, the boundaries of reality splintering. The murmurs crescendoed into a cacophony. Something unexpected occurred. A single glimmer of light erupted from my flashlight, illuminating the surroundings. For a brief moment, I saw the cavern walls lined with faces, twisted and screaming, their mouths open in silent agony, their eyes hollow voids gazing out from the stone. The breath in my lungs felt like broken glass, my strength waning as the howl of the darkness overwhelmed me. The figure lunged, piercing through the light with an unnatural speed, each movement sending waves of dread that drank deeply from my spirit. Then, the floor trembled violently. I shouted in alarm, my balance faltering as the stones shifted beneath me. I clutched at the ground, desperately trying to hold on, but the earth rolled like waves in a storm. And as the darkness surged, clamoring for my surrender, the ground erupted, fissures yawning wide like gaping maws seeking to swallow me whole. Just as I thought I was falling, I caught a glimpse of something more than shadow. Was it a face? Two glowing eyes stared back at me, luminous and devoid of empathy, mocking my plight. And then, the ground beneath me crumbled entirely, plunging me into the abyss. As the darkness swallowed my scream, I tumbled through the black void, an unending drop pulling me deeper into layers of darkness I had never imagined. The sound of my own heartbeats echoed painfully in my ears, harmonizing with the whispers that spiraled around me like a vortex, making it impossible to determine where they originated from my mind or somewhere far more sinister. The air grew heavier, saturated with an oppressive dread that squeezed tight around my chest. I braced for impact, but instead of slamming into rock or water, I felt myself engulfed in something cold and clammy, wrapping around my body like an alive shroud. Paralyzed by the frigid embrace, my thoughts spiraled. My instincts screamed for me to fight, to break free, but it felt as if the very essence of despair was lacing itself through my veins, seeping into my mind, numbing me to anything beyond the surface of my own terror. Suddenly, I was released, spilling out into a space that felt vast, yet suffocating. My flashlight flickered with defiance in the void, casting erratic beams on sheer walls formed from stone polished to an unnatural sheen. What appeared as silence pervaded, though I sensed a pulsy rhythm of dread thrumming so subtly in the air it felt tangible. Where am I? I gasped, my breath clouding around me, mingling with something more pungent, a rotten smell that crawled into my nostrils and made bile rise in my throat. The cavern seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, each shadow a chilling reminder of the figure that had pursued me. My heart raced again, a wild bird longing for escape. I stumbled forward, scanning the terrain. A thick fog curled at my feet, twining around my ankles, whispering promises of it being my only escape. With every step, the disembodied whispers grew bolder, surrounding me as they unraveled their sinister tale. You don't belong. Stay forever. I shook my head violently. No, I won't. The words caught in my throat, dissipating into the dense atmosphere. Ahead, the darkness receded just enough for me to see glimmers of what appeared to be a cavern wall, engraved not with natural markings but with patterns that seemed alive, pulsing angrily, alive with whispers of 1,000 souls trapped in their eternal status. My hand brushed against the surface, and a jolt shot through my visions flickered in my mind, flashes of those who had ventured here before me, their fear imprinted in their final moments captured within the stone. Then the ground began to tremble again, but this time it wasn't just a quake. The very rock twisted and morphed as though it were a living organism. I staggered back, panic surging. A hollow groan echoed around me, the walls closing in as the faces began to shift, struggling, their expressions impossibly contorting, reaching out from the stone to touch the air. I could almost hear their cries, the cracks in their voices echoing through the cavern like a haunting melody. That was when I noticed the darker shadow moving among them, a grotesque caricature, melding with the swirling faces and forming a grotesque tapestry of hopelessness. It grinned, revealing a jaw that unhinged, elongating into something that defied nature, breaths hissing through its teeth like steam escaping a kettle. Join them, it hissed, its voice slithering through the air and brushing against my skin like icy tendrils. Don't fight your fate, embrace it. Falling to my knees, the chaotic coalition of fear and bile surged once more. No, I screamed, scrambling backward as panic clawed at the pit of my stomach. The stone wall throbbed in response, faces twisting through agony, reaching for me as though they sought to drag me down with them. Above me, the cavern's ceiling rumbled, a low growl reverberating in my bones. I peered up just as large boulders began to loosen, dislodging and tumbling toward me like ancient sentinels of doom. My world shifted, and time hung in limbo, suspended between moments of terror and decision. Then, the shadows shifted. Something immense rose behind me, a presence far larger and more terrifying than I'd ever felt. Heart in my throat, I spun to face whatever monstrosity had manifested in this pit of despair, ready to confront my fate. The light from my flashlight flickered one last time, illuminating the silhouette of something truly otherworldly, a giant figure, deformed and celestial, its eyes alight with a terrible hunger. Join us, or be consumed, it echoed, and before I could respond, the ground erupted around me once more, the darkness creeping in like a storm, as I was engulfed in an endless scream of silence. And then, just as I thought hopelessness enveloped me completely, the cavern floor gave way beneath my feet yet again. I was falling into an even darker unknown, and as the abyss welcomed me with open arms, I could hear them, the souls still damned, calling out for my name. I landed with a bone-jarring thud, the air knocked from my lungs as I rolled to the side, disoriented and gasping for breath. The cold seeped through my clothes, wrapping around me in a chilling grip that felt alive. Groaning, I pushed myself up, blinking against the murky darkness that surrounded me. My flashlight flickered, revealing the jagged edges of rock and echoing the remnants of the horror I had just escaped. That I squinted into the shadows, and an unnatural silence prevailed, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. A shudder ran down my spine as I recalled the grotesque figure that had loomed above me, its warning still echoing in my ears. It was as if the darkness bore witness to my fear, my very essence becoming a part of this underground nightmare. Tentatively, I picked myself up, moving forward with hesitant steps into the new chamber I found myself in. The walls shimmered and glistened with moisture, and as I ventured deeper, a pale bioluminescent glow caught my eye. My pulse quickened with both hope and dread. I wasn't alone. The luminescence originated from clusters of fungi, sprouting from the damp earth in clusters that looked almost ethereal. They pulsed with life, and I felt an inexplicable pull toward them, a yearning that clawed at my very being. With wary fingers, I reached out, almost entranced, but the moment I brushed against the delicate caps, a jolt of agony shot through me. My vision distorted, waves of sorrow and despair surged through me like a riptide dragging me under. Flashes of memories invaded my mind, faces rooted in agony and despair. Behind every twinkling glimmer of the fungi were shadows of those who had wandered into this endless maze before me, their lives extinguished and merged into the very fabric of this hellish realm. Help us. I could almost hear them whisper within the echo of my own fears. I stumbled back, tearing my hand away from the forest of luminescent sorrow, gasping as the chilling truth settled in. I wasn't just in danger of being consumed physically. My mind was being devoured piece by piece. As I regrouped, a sudden crash resonated through the cavern, like thunder striking the air, rattling the stones above. Startled, I turned, my heart racing again as the shadows contorted and morphed into grotesqueries of figures, the tortured souls reaching out, emerging from the earthen walls, clawing for release. Their eyes, sunken and haunted, bore into me with unrelenting desperation. No. I shrieked, scrambling back, but the ground quaked again, and the very earth beneath me seemed to tremble with life. I felt a shift in the air, a thunderous whisper resonating beneath my feet as the entity of despair began to rise once more. I had to get out. Every instinct screamed for me to escape this place, but the tunnel stretches ahead twisted into a labyrinthine snarl, each path plunging further into the unknown. And just as I thought I could discern a route, the wall pulsated, reshaping itself before my eyes, shifting and coiling like a serpent poised to strike. The whispers intensified, overlapping, drowning out all conscious thought. Join us, they beckoned, becoming a chorus of desperation. A cold sweat broke across my skin, and with every moment of hesitation, I felt them edging closer, tendrils from the stones, reaching for my soul, aching to steal me away. That I turned to the dim glow behind me, a chance at freedom, but before I could take a step, the ground fractured. The earth gaped wide and dark, opening like a mouth eager to swallow me whole. Panic set in. Adrenaline surged as I fought to maintain my balance. My breath quickened, the cavern's air thickening as dread filled every inch. This place was alive, conscious, and insatiably hungry. Just then, from the depths of that gaping maw, I saw something rise, something that reflected the bioluminescence yet was darker than the shadows that embraced it. A figure emerged, a twisted mockery of life, wearing a skin that seemed to shimmer and seep, taking on a new form, fluid and horrifying. With a grotesque grin plastered across its face, it extended a clawed hand toward me, and its voice slithered through the air. You've lingered too long. Your essence shall feed us all. That I was paralyzed, rooted to the ground as the shadows swirled around me, suffocating the last threads of my will. And then, just as the dark figure lunged, the entire cavern imploded in a cacophony of cries and screams, engulfing the world in an unruly darkness once more, pulling me toward an unimaginable fate. The last sensation I felt was the ground giving way underfoot as I screamed, lost in the void, surrounded by a raging tempest of despair and dread, as I was drawn into a darkness unlike anything I had ever known. The void enveloped me, swallowing my cries as time lost all meaning. Just when I thought I might be entirely consumed by darkness, I crashed onto a damp, uneven floor that felt familiar but foreign. As I lay there, staring into the pitch black above, I could feel the walls breathing, expanding and contracting like the chest of a sleeping beast, shaking off the disorientation. I pushed myself up, my heart pounding in my throat. The ambient sounds of the cavern echoed eerily, as if mocking my vulnerability. Something had changed. A thick, palpable weight hung in the air, almost viscous, like walking through a thick fog of dread. I could sense that I was not alone. I stood, feeling the slick ground beneath my feet, and groped in the darkness for my flashlight, the flickering light finally flickering back to life with a weak hum. I scanned the cavern, illuminated only in a dim glow that cut through the stranglehold of shadows. Towering stalagmites arose like jagged teeth, and the walls shimmered with an unsettling wetness, alive yet inert. But before I could gather my thoughts, a low rumble shook the ground. Fear surged within me as I caught movement in the darkness of my periphery. Shapes danced at the edges of the light, wispy and intangible, beckoning with a spectral allure. I turned too abruptly, the beam of my flashlight slicing the dark, and there they were, the figures of the lost souls, their faces contorted in eternal anguish, mouths moving as if trying to scream without sound. Suddenly, a cacophony of whispers erupted, the languages of countless bodies past converging into one tormenting symphony. Stay, stay, they hissed, each word like ice water coursing through my veins. I took a hesitant step back, a chill crawling up my spine as the murmurs grew louder, tinged with urgency their grasping, spectral hands reaching through the veil of time, yearning for the warmth of life. I turned to flee, heart racing. But the path before me warped and twisted, blurring between the tangible and grotesquely familiar. Just ahead, I saw the faint outline of a tunnel leading deeper into the Kavisa, light not from my flashlight, but an otherworldly glow pulsating with an eerie energy. I could feel its pull, magnifying the fear gnawing at my insides. As I hesitated, the shadows behind me coalesced into a mass, blocking any possible retreat. The air thickened. It was as if the very essence of the cave sought to consume me. Panic gripped me. I chose instinct over reason and sprinted toward the glow. I felt every heartbeat reverberate through the ground, drowning out the whispers that now crescendoed into a frenzied wail. Clawing at my mind, I stumbled into the tunnel, breathless, feet slipping on the slick surface until I crashed against the unforgiving wall. As I pushed myself up, I had a dreadful realization: the light above was no escape, but a false promise, a taunting beacon leading to an unknowable horror. Ahead, strange symbols etched into the stone walls flickered with an unnatural luminescence, pulsating rhythmically. An urgency pulsed through me as I steadied myself. The symbols moved, etching themselves anew with the flow of an unseen script, whispering secrets from the void that seemed to breathe around me. Suddenly, the whispers shifted, turning into laughter, high-pitched and mocking, echoing off the walls and reverberating throughout the cavern. I staggered, disoriented, as trembling shadows flickered like flames around me. They seemed to dance, forming shapes that writhed and twisted, weaving in and out of focus. In the whirlwind of my panic, I caught sight of a door, ancient and gnarled, partially obscured by pulsating shadows. A cold, dreadful intuition gripped me, but I rushed toward it, knowing there was no other option, and every moment counted. As I reached for the handle, the shadows surged forward, a cacophony of anguished screams surging behind me. I pulled open the door and stepped inside, gasping at the sudden chill. The space was immediately unlike the cavian, impossibly vast emptiness swirled with depths of black that receded into an unfathomable abyss. Then, with horror, I turned to see that the door began to close, the shadows coiling like serpents, preventing my escape. Suddenly, I felt a presence beside me. A gaze so heavy and ancient scrutinized my every line. I turned to face it, my heart racing. Standing there, a figure shrouded in a shimmering mist stared back, its eyes burning with the reel of lost Levisa, reflection of my own terror etched across its wretched visage. That I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but only silence poured from my lips as the entity raised its fingers, pointing directly at my heart, and whispered the words that would crystallize my fate. "You are one of us now." With a blink and a sweep of black, the world around me vanished, and I was ensnared by an unending chill, one's reality collapsing like a frail web. As despair enveloped me once more, I realized I hadn't fled. I had been ensnared, tethered to the darkness as the portal closed behind me. But just before all went dark, a faint glimmer caught my eye, a broken piece of the past, a ghostly cloning of my own face, winking, reflecting back in the shadows, hinting that this was far from over. I shivered, for in the darkness, I could feel their hunger surge anew, and I was left to ponder who or what had truly taken me. The question lingered as I felt the weight of shadows closing in, a truth as chilling as a grave. The darkness pulsed around me, wrapping my limbs in a shroud of icy tendrils that bore the weight of countless souls long forgotten. A stifling silence blanketed the space, broken only by the echoing mantra of that intrepid laugh, a mocking harmony that felt both like a warning and a welcome. I stumbled back, away from the encroaching specter, an unease coiling tighter within my chest like a serpent ready to strike. "Please," I whispered into the void, but my voice seemed to dissolve, swept away in a current of chilling air. I fumbled backward, disoriented, my hands grazing the wall. The ancient symbols flickered rhythmically with a malevolent intent, mocking my desperation. They pulsed, beckoning me nearer, enticing and terrifying. An urgency skittered over my skin as if whispers of the untold past urged me to decipher them, to unravel their enigma. Before I could process the dim luminescence, an icy breeze wove through the hallway, wrapping itself tight around my legs, urging me to turn back. But the thought of confronting the glimmering shadows fueled my dread. It felt alive, mockingly familiar, taunting me to delve further into its depths like an insatiable maw waiting to consume me. I turned sharply, seeking anything that could provide an anchor in this labyrinth of despair. My flashlight flickered dangerously, the beam growing weaker, distorting into a mere whisper of light. I raised it toward the shrugs of gloom, desperate to find an exit or an ally in this abyss. The chuckles grew louder, surrounding me, and I felt eyes upon me, clamoring to uncover the depths of misery I harbored within. A sudden surge of heat brushed against my face, igniting a flicker of courage. I couldn't stay here, lost in this suffocating realm. Gritting my teeth, I stepped deeper into the shadows, the whispers merging into a chilling chant. "Join us," they beckoned, as if they could see the very blood coursing through my veins. That a kaleidoscope of memories flashed before me, visited caves and lost hikers, victims of the insatiable darkness that spilled from this realm of sorrow. Each memory a tether, a binding propelling me towards an unseen destination where everything I had ever feared awaited me, wanting me to confront the weight of my own actions. But now was not the time. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. I pressed onward. The structure of the tunnel twisted unpredictably, an ever-changing mosaic that tightened around me like a vice, forcing me to pick either chaos or clarity. The ghostly laughter morphed into a symphony of voices, each rising and falling like a Taidia procession of the damned, chanting verses that spoke of loss and despair, all in sync with the beat of my panicked heart. The tunnel opened abruptly into a colossal underground chamber, filled with grotesque rock formations that seemed to writhe and pulse. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of what lay within: scattered bones, remnants of those who had not been fortunate enough to escape this accursed labyrinth. Fear gripped my throat, but before I could recoil, I felt something touch my shoulder, an unearthly chill that paralyzed my senses. That I whipped around, my heart racing. A figure stood mere inches away, an apparition cloaked in shadows, merging into the very darkness around it. The shape seemed almost human, its eyes glowing like coals in a dying fire. An incomplete mouth stretched into a grin that chilled me to my core, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. "Welcome," it purred, the voice syrupy yet hollow, a sadistic intimacy that clawed through me. Was it seeing the remnants of my life, relishing in the chaos I had created? And as it spoke, the walls around me shuddered violently, scattering more echoes of laughter, echoing the cries of those who had come before. Another voice crept through the cacophony, clearer than all the rest, resounding like a mournful bell. "You must find the heart of darkness. It beats for you now." Before I could respond, the grotesque figure lunged forward, and the world around me shifted. The ground trembled, opening beneath me a chasm of oblivion. I was falling, the whispers clawing at my mind, the specter's laughter fading into a sinister void. I hurtled through the air, eyes widened in horror as the chamber above swallowed itself, a frozen scream escaping my lips. And just as I thought the darkness would claim me, a blinding flash ignited from below, consuming the void, an echo beckoning from the depths. I was encircled in an embrace of nothingness, but the echo morphed into a pulsating heartbeat, reverberating through the massive cavity. It echoed with untold power, and somehow within that darkness, I felt the urge to grapple and grasp, to understand what was meant. But before I could comprehend the depths of the chilling truth, a haunting voice slithered into my consciousness, a darkly seductive promise that would forever change me. "You can't escape what you are meant to become." With that, I plunged into utter blackness, the heartbeat reverberating into a despairing anthem, and the unknown awaited, ready to unveil its sinister secrets. The disorienting freefall felt eternal, a gruesome ballet as the wind roared in my ears, wrapping itself around every desperate thought. The heartbeat pounded against my chest, drumming along with my own racing pulse, urging me towards a grotesque union of will and wickedness. The deafening sound swallowed me whole, forging a melodic discord that thrummed within my bones. Fear morphed into an almost intoxicating urgency, a queasy thrill that left me breathless. Then, with a sickening thud, I landed. Pain jarred through my limbs, awakening sensations lying dormant in the depths of dread. I lay prone on the cold, uneven ground, several small stones biting into my flesh. Gritting my teeth, I rolled onto my back, fighting the wave of disorientation that blurred my vision. Above me, an endless void loomed, an inky tapestry of night threadbare with spectral lights glimmering faintly above, as if the abyss had opened a window into the outer darkness. As I rested, my breath forming fog patches in the frigid air, the heartbeat surged. It resonated stronger, pulsing closer, reverberating as though coming from every direction, alive and omnipotent. Rising slowly, I shook my head, willing the shadows to dispel, yet they deepened like a thick blanket of sorrow. The walls pulsed rhythmically, infused with a life of their own, and as I surveyed my locale, eerie shapes began to materialize within the surrounding darkness. Each shadow morphed into a figure, severed silhouettes dancing on the periphery of my vision. They whispered fragmented words, a haunting dialogue threaded between past and present, taunting memories long buried. I strained to decipher their murmurs, the sound stretching thin like threadbare fabric, the echoes of guilt woven into a tapestry of my existence. "Why have you come?" One voice croaked from a figure that coalesced beyond my line of sight, a remnant bathed in an ethereal glow, its features indistinct and unsettling. "You do not belong here, but here you are, forever seeking what has always been too far out of reach." My heart staggered. "I want to leave," I stammered, but courage slipped through my fingers like sand, leaving only despair. "I don't belong in this darkness, but darkness belongs to you," it rasped, its breath chilling the air. "You have stirred the heart, awakened the slumbering desires that dwell in you. You cannot flee your essence." The laughter escalated, rising to a fevered pitch as the figures twisted into grotesque imitations of joy and tragedy, tearing apart their own duality. A chill enveloped my spine, a creeping realization that I stood amidst not mere shadows but echoes of guilt, spirits chained by their sins, and I was among them, a jarring interloper. My pulse quickened. I had stumbled into a colossal network of guilt, festering beneath the surface, a poignant reminder of the burden I carried. I recalled the faces of the lost, their names echoing in the void of memory, fragmenting my heart with shards of their sorrow. Racked with terror over my own failures, I realized I was not merely observing. I was a part of this tableau. With every pulsation of the unseen heart, the ghosts surged closer, swirling around. I thought about those I'd failed to protect, those who had vanished within these caves, forever caught between worlds. Desperation took root, and as I stumbled backward, my foot caught on something icy and slick. I yelped and fell against an obelisk of stony, a twisted formation that seemed to hum with a cadence of rage and despair. Around it, an ancient sigil flickered to life, etching itself into my mind. I could feel it, the weight of years steeped in malice and sorrow, beckoning me to uncover its gruesome tale. But before I could rationalize my dread or summon the strength to escape, a figure loomed directly before me, exuding an overwhelming presence. Its eyes glistened ferociously in the dark, intensifying like twin beacons of destiny. "Choose," it demanded, its voice resonant, deep, and reverberating through the air, filling my lungs with fear. "Will you join us, or will you fight? One way leads to salvation, the other to annihilation." Paralyzed, I felt the weight of every decision I had ever made pressing against my soul, squeezing the breath from my chest. Behind me, the shadows swirled hungrily, waiting for my answer, a storm of souls bartering for my allegiance. I could sense the heartbeat crescendoing, echoing within my very being, wrapping me tighter within its embrace. I opened my mouth to speak. A piercing scream erupted from the abyss, drowning out my thoughts. It resonated through the stony, a hollow wail that shattered the air, and the shadows recoiled in horror. And as the chaos erupted around me, I saw the faces of my past lost souls stretching towards me, mouths twisted in agony. Your choice determines their fate. The figure bellowed, its voice thick with malice. Will you condemn them to the darkness, or will you free them? The chamber shook, and all at once, the ground beneath me began to split, endless dark yawning open like a grotesque maw waiting to swallow all that dared linger. I teetered on the edge of the unknown, the echoes of lives lost pulling toward the pit. I took a step forward, but was yanked back by an unseen force, and my heart raced with the pounding of my fate. Before I could formulate my desperate response, the specters surged like a wave, crashing towards me agitated, relentless, a torrent of misery that sought to consume. And as the darkness writhed and swirled, an anguished voice found me amid the chaos, whispering a name that sent chills through my very soul. You know the truth. You always have. I was thrust into the center of the maelstrom, teetering on the brink, suspended between choices untold, while the shadows roared to life around me, their despairful dance spiraling toward consuming madness. Everything went black, and just when it seemed there was no escape, an unseen hand clamped tight around my throat, lifting me into the void, and with a final echoing scream, the abyss closed in, swallowing all light as I was dragged deeper into the heart of darkness, unraveling the very core of my own existence. I struggled against the vice grip tightening around my throat, the pressure forcing the remnants of air from my lungs. Senseless panic clouded my thoughts, but an unmistakable intuition flickered at the edges of my mind, urging me to give in to the darkness that surrounded me. There was an uncanny comfort within its embrace, pulling me deeper, whispering promises of release, a morbid tranquility that sang to the raw edges of my fear. Suddenly, I was dropped into a murky pool, the water viscous and heavy, clinging to my skin like the grasp of a malevolent spirit. I fought against the cold, twisting and turning to beckon upward for air, but the more I struggled, the more it dragged me down. Shadows glided beneath the surface, their forms shifting and writhing like serpents eager to devour, igniting the suffocating claustrophobia gripping my heart. The whispers grew louder, coiling around me like an embrace gone wrong. Join us, they hummed, drawing my consciousness deeper into the oppressive dark waters. Make your choice. You're not lost, you are home. I could see faces emerging from the depths, once familiar, now unrecognizable in agony. They reached for me with translucent hands, fingers stretching like decaying roots. I could hear their muted cries beckoning, pleading, twisting my stomach in knots. Why were they here? Where were they? The unresolved grief of their fates harshly clashed against my desire to escape. Then, a flickering shadow drifted into view across the surface, shimmering with an otherworldly light that made my heart accelerate beyond reason. Was it hope, or merely another trap spun cleverly to ensnare me? It beckoned, moving effortlessly through the darkness, promising otherworldly wonders, but its eyes betrayed a sinister truth, glimmering with malevolence. They revealed that it sought not salvation, but despair. That I clawed at the water, propelling myself toward the flickering shadow, the stench of decay and longing mingling in the oppressive air around me. As my fingers closed around the edge of the shadow's light, I surged upward with every ounce of willpower I had left, breaking free from the abyss that threatened to consume me whole. Gasping for air, I emerged. The cold seeped into my bones, and panic constricted my chest as I collapsed onto the damp ground. I lay there, shivering, my heart racing with both terror and exhilaration. I had escaped, but at what cost? The night around me was thick and alive. It pulsed with an unspeakable energy, tinged with veiled malice that surged through the atmosphere like an electric current. That I rose unsteadily to my feet, surveying my surroundings. The landscape had shifted while I struggled beneath the murk. Stalagmites jutted upward like jagged teeth in a paper-white mouth. The clarity of the air was slicing a stark juxtaposition to the suffocating shadows that lurked just beyond the edges of my perception. A sudden chill swept through me, petrifying my blood as I sensed I was not alone. Shadows danced at the fringes, their forms twisting sharply, forming undulating figures that conspired with the dim light. Behind me, laughter echoed, a cacophony that sent icy tendrils creeping along my spine. It was a sing-song melody that reverberated through the caves, swirling with the sound of muffled cries of Regrita Macabre's Symphony of the Lost. This way, a wispy voice echoed, crystalline yet hideous, slicing through the tension. A figure stepped into view, clothed in silken shadows that surged and curled around it like smoke, an indistinct silhouette that offered no solace. Its eyes glowed with a pale light, fixing me in place with a gaze that felt like the weight of countless souls. "Follow me to the truth," it cooed, voice soft like silk wound around barbed wire, alluring yet dangerous. "You must choose where your heart truly belongs. The heart knows the truth and always leads you back to the darkness." With every fiber of my being, I wanted to refuse, to run. But the shadows shifted, rustling in agreement, pulling at the edges of my resolve. The weight of the lost soul's gaze bore into me, demanding acknowledgement, urging me to remember that I remembered. The faces I carried were more than memories. They were shackles binding me to this festering abyss. And the darkness weighed heavy with their resentment. I took a hesitant step forward, and the figure beckoned again, luring me closer. But then, something shifted in the air, a wrongness that sent a fresh wave of nausea flooding through me. The laughter grew louder, now twisted and unrecognizable, distorting into pained screams that reverberated off the cavern walls. My heart leapt as biting dread consumed me, slithering into my mind like a venomous serpent. Involuntarily, I glanced behind me, and the shadows coalesced into a singular massa dark being whose features were grotesque and more real than my own. Its grin was wide and wicked, a mimicry of joy that sent shivers along my spine. "You cannot escape what dwells within. They have come for you," it hissed, and the shadowy figures began to congeal, morphing, their forms writhing into a tempest of bodies, all clamoring to drag me back into the depths. With panic roaring in my ears, I bolted in the opposite direction, sprinting through the labyrinth of stone. The laughter echoed behind me, the air thickening with each desperate step I took. No longer did I feel the cold dampness of the earth beneath my shoes, but the palpable pulse of an unseen heart, beating ferociously as if keeping time against my own. And just when I thought I had found a way to evade the crowding shadows, I stumbled into a hollow chamber beyond comprehension. There, lit by the eeriest glow, lay an altar, its surface brimming with remnants of faded offerings and shards of glass glistening like cruel stars. A chilling realization washed over me. I wasn't just running from the shadows. I was drawn to them, unwittingly tethered to the source of my dread. That I stepped closer, my heart pounding with trepidation, and as I reached out to touch the altar, a shiver coursed through me. The earth shuddered violently, and faces began to materialize along the shimmering edges of the altar, all staring back at me with hollowed eyes full of an ancient knowledge that reached beyond death. But before I could utter a sound, the shadows surged forward, pooling over the altar like tar, threatening to overwhelm me entirely as I struggled to pull away from the radiant, yet horrifying, spectacle. The echoes of despair rose to a horrific crescendo, a cacophony of voices crashing together into a symphony of primal agony. In that moment of sheer terror, I understood that my only choice was to confront the depths of my despair. And just as the darkness surrounded me, the piercing wails crescendoed into a singular piercing scream that reverberated through the abyss, and everything went black. But as the void consumed me, one chilling whisper wrapped around my consciousness, a final disturbing promise. "You still have a choice." I felt the darkness clutch at me with clawed fingers as I hung suspended in an inky void, the echo of that final whisper threatening to unravel my very being. "You still have a choice," it taunted me, shimmering like a mad mirage, stirring the dregs of fear buried deep within my psyche. Every breath I took was heavy with the weight of despair, an atmosphere thickening with every memory that flickered through my mind, each one a harrowing reminder of what was lost. Time lost all meaning in that expanse of nothingness. I floated as though suspended between life and death, heart pounding rhythmically in defiance of the encroaching hunger of the darkness. Then, amidst the weight of terror, a vivid image burst for the flash of moments, bright and colorful, where laughter danced like sunlight across the ground. My family. Their faces became my lifeline, fragile and ephemeral, but calling me back, pulling me to reality. With a shearing agony, I felt the vast nothingness begin to splinter before me. A crack of light emerged, and with it came the sickening smell of decay and damp earth. The shadows writhed eagerly around me, thirsting for my remembrance, and as I plunged through the fracture of light, I was thrust back into the cave. But everything felt wrong. The echoes of the past reverberated throughout the chamber, a familiar horror that felt intimately personal. I opened my eyes, gasping, to discover that I was no longer alone. Surrounding me were the shadowy figures I had tried to escape. They loomed, their forms twisted and shifting, faces half-formed like charcoal sketches caught in a cruel wind, eyes filled with pleading and a despair that gripped my heart in icy fingers. "Come home," they whispered in unison, their voices fading in and out, merging into one haunting melody, a haunting requiem for the lost. Though the temptation pulsed through me, a sickly sweetness enveloping my mind, I pressed my hands to my ears, struggling to resist. Shadows crept closer, snaking along the ground, drawing nearer with every breath I dared to take. Instinct pushed me back, forcing me to scramble against the altar behind me, eyes wide with terror as a wall of void threatened to close in. I could sense their hunger growing, the urgency to pull me into their realm tearing at the edges of my sanity. Then, as if summoned by my dread, the air thickened, the atmosphere transformed again. With a guttural howl, the shadows surged forward, morphing into grotesque shapes. Their laughter twisted, becoming a cacophony of horrific cries, mingling with the sorrowful whispers from my past. The figures began to coalesce into something more corporeal, revealing monstrous visages adorned with sorrow and malevolency, lost souls of those who had fallen into their own darkness. "Why did you leave us?" One figure croaked, its mouth stretching impossibly wide, laughter erupting into a strangled cry. "Will you forsake us, too?" Suddenly, the chamber began to vibrate violently, and the altar blazed a sudden, eerie light that illuminated the deepest shadows in a stark contrast of life and death. In that moment, a vision surged forth, overwhelming me. The cave as it had once been, vibrant and alive, filled with laughter, joy, and the warmth of familiar, stark juxtaposition against the embrace of these spectral beings. But that once warm scene dimmed rapidly, swept by a chilling dread. I could see the darkness creeping into the edges of my memory, pulling apart the ties to my past, darkness alive with the malevolence of 1,000 regrets. Panic rose anew in my chest. I realized that they were not drawn to me, but to what I could lose. "No," I screamed, clutching my head as the essence of their cries pierced my mind. "I will not forsake them." With trembling hands, I reached for the altar, finding solace in the tangible structure beneath me, an anchor amidst the storm of despair swirling around. I had to resist. I had to fight. But then the floor beneath me crumbled away, splintering into shards of darkness that fell into an endless chasm filled with the wretched howling of souls lost. To the void. Frantically, I dug my fingers into the surface, desperately attempting to hold on as the shadows lunged for me once more. The altar illuminated brighter, and from within its depths, a vision burst for the pulsing horror. I saw them, the familiar faces of my family twisted and contorted beyond recognition, their voices merging into a cacophony of pain and despair. "You abandoned us," they cried, and the shadows writhed in delight, feeling my anguish and regret like a banquet laid bare. Then, two figures materialized before me, a young child and a woman clad in rags, faces hidden in shadow. The child pointed at me, eyes wells of glistening hope. "You promised to protect us," it shrieked, and the shadows surged forward as it echoed. "Help us." Just as I was about to respond, the shadows clamored louder, drowning out my thoughts, overcoming me with suffocating dread. The mass of darkness loomed closer, and in one last desperate bid for freedom, I could only scream, "I won't leave you." The ground trembled, the air crackled, and the shadows converged upon me, enveloping me in their suffocating veil. And just before I was consumed in the darkness, a chilling revelation coursed through my veins like ice. The choice I thought I had was never mine to make. And then silence fell, the shadows retreating momentarily, followed by an echoing laugh that twisted my very essence. "Welcome home," it breathed softly, its voice slicing through the void. And in that chilling moment, I understood that in this world of shadows and lost souls, The choices were not about escaping the dark, but succumbing to its embrace forever. The pain tore through me, an icy needle plunging into my heart as the realization settled like a boulder in my gut. I was still in the cave, in the heart of darkness, but the shadows that surrounded me were more than mere remnants of anguish. They were the very essence of my being, woven into the tapestry of despair I had tried so desperately to escape. "Welcome home," they whispered in unison, their voices infinitely familiar, as if every limb of my own being could feel the echo. The walls pulsed with an insidious warmth, a mockery of life and light, counting off heartbeats that were both mine and theirs. I gazed into the faces surrounding Mephises I had failed, faces that I loved. Ulterior beings birthed from guilt, wrought from an incomplete past that clawed at the edges of my memory. And yet, they were also reflections of what I feared most, the acceptance of eternal darkness. "Join us," came the thrumming melody, gnarled and beckoning, pulling me into the very depths of them, their sorrow mingling with mine, a foreboding swirl that tightened around my chest. "You have been chosen," they sang softly, their insistent whispers threading through my psyche. "Your sacrifice shall not be in vain." Just as I thought I could collapse under the weight of their haunting promises, the altar behind me flared with life, veins of luminous energy racing through the stone, illuminating the cruel desperation on their faces. The light pulsed with a power that surged against the darkness, swarming, fighting for dominance, for my soul. I staggered backward, my mind grappling with the confusion of their words. "Protect us." The child's voice splintered through the anguished chorus, filling the air with a desperate ache, a plea I could not ignore. My heart ached with a haunting recognition, the memories cascading through Maya mother's warmth, a sibling's laughter, but as recollection deepened, another shadow towered over me, swallowing me again in delightful torment. "You were bound by choice," it hissed with a voice laden with disdain, a figure pulling from the depths of my nightmares, grotesque and familiar. "You thought you could return to the light. But remember, the darkness finds its own." It leaned closer, grotesque and both real and unreal, the embodiment of choices made eons ago, for every mistake, every moment spent fleeing instead of confronting. The heart of darkness pulsed as if in direct response, feeding me the guilt I had tried so hard to escape. Suddenly, the altar's glow pulsated higher, thrumming with energy that danced along my skin. My fingers reached out, desperate to feel its warmth, the flickering light intoxicating yet scalding. If I could understand its truth, perhaps I could save them. I could save myself. With trembling resolve, I surged forward, colliding with the altar. The moment contact was made, a jolt coursed through my veins, a flood of memories raced through me. Visions of laughter and love twisted into screams of terror, each note ringing as true as my own heartbeat. "Protect us," they cried again as figures jetted from the wall, their mouths open in eternal agony, tearing through the void. With newfound defiance, I shouted into the chaos, "I will not forsake you." The moment passed, and as I stood there enveloped in light and shadow, I hurled my words into the abyss, shattering its hold. "I will never join you." I felt strength from my heart blazing through me, igniting a fire that could scatter this overwhelming darkness. But yet, the figures screamed in urgency. "You were chosen," they wailed, grasping at me with nothing but their shadows, as I felt the ground beneath me heave and the altar shake, threatening to crumble. "You cannot escape." And just like that, the darkness coiled around me, ravenous, ceaseless. I was clouded with an overwhelming desire to succumb, to release myself from the weight of everything I'd ever borne, to be free of their whispers. But in that moment, I realized the darkness did not merely feed on the lost. It grew stronger through their anguish and desires entangled with my OW. I screamed, as raw energy coursed up through the altar, illuminating the chamber in a blinding flare. The darkness yowled as the altar pulsated in defiance, revealing a shattered pathway leading to a portal I could escape. Yet, even now I could hear the whispers of the lost souls whispering my name, chanting and beckoning me toward their parallel suffering. Just as the shadows lunged to envelop me, I hurled myself forward into the light. A deafening roar filled the air like wind in a summer storm, sweeping me into new realms that as I emerged, breathless and gasping in another chamber. The glow faded slowly, and the shadows transformed, revealing the faces twisting behind me. The cavern had changed, but the darkness lurked, still echoing their pleas. Everything was your choice, they whispered, taunting laughter rippling through the air as I turned, trembling but determined. With resolve, I looked back upon them, shrouded now in anguish. I will find a way to set you free, I promised, the tremor in my voice steadied by hopeful belief that perhaps, even in darkness, there was a sliver of redemption. And just as I turned to forge my path forward, laughter erupted from the shadows behind. The chilling truth resonated deep within me, for I knew the darkness would remember. It would never let me go, and I could still feel it breathing down my neck, waiting for the moment I might succumb to the very shadows I was struggling to escape, always whispering, "You'll return, you have no choice."